So hi and welcome to another review, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Endgame Gear Xm1 that you've all been asking for. So this video has been heavily requested, so today you get to understand all the technical spec that we go through as we have done for all the other mice that I've reviewed recently, getting all the charts and all the force tests using the force gauge meter so we can understand exactly how good this mouse is. So one thing that people have been asking quite a lot about is this new patented analog technology that's supposed to reduce the latency for the click down to about 1 millisecond. So we're going to be testing that to see if it's showing any difference here against the tests that we normally perform. If you aren't familiar with my videos, I go into a lot more in-depth detail than a lot of other reviewers. I don't just read the boxes here. I give you a lot of statistics and charts to review. One of the things is that I'm going to challenge you here is to watch this video and to point out anything that I haven't covered here. And that will help me to ensure in the next video that I've done that, but I don't see that being the case. So on my beardedbob.com website, I've added a new chart system on there. Take a look, let me know if there's any charts that you want to see. And I'll put those on there, but what's on there is more the averaging charts across all mice, and each individual mouse review will have its own charts comparing it against other mice so you can look at those statistics. So I picked this mouse up for $53.99 UK pounds. It's in the US for $59.99 US dollars, and all the links to where you can buy this will be in the description, as will any other links as well. So this price range is fitting into the, not the budget range, but the kind of premium beginning market, I want to call it, where the premium mice start around the £50, $50 US dollars. So it's at a good entry level here for a premium mouse. So let's start off with the design and shape as we always do here. And one thing you're going to notice straight off the bat here is how low the front profile of this mouse is and the slope that it's got. Also, it's quite a flat top, this mouse, in terms of where the buttons are. It does have a hump on the rear of this mouse. When I first picked this mouse up in my hand, it just felt really, really nice. This is an ambidextrous design, although it has buttons on the right hand side here. It's a 6-button configuration. It's got the primary left and right mouse buttons. It's got a scroll wheel press down button. And it has a profile button underneath the base, so there'll be no accidental clicks here when you're gaming. One thing to note here is a little bit different is the side buttons are a different size. The back one is slightly longer than the front one, and they do have a high profile here on the side as well. The mouse itself comes with no comfort curves in the left and right mouse button. It has what looks like one of the smallest scroll wheels I've seen for a while here. But we'll measure that later on with part of the statistics we're going to go through. It is a real good fingerprint magnet here, so you're going to have to clean it a lot. I'm having a lot of problems keeping this clean. And it's finished in kind of like a glossy finish, which to me is kind of a bit slippy and probably could do with a slightly bit more texture. It comes with a rubber cable here, and we'll go into a bit more detail on that later. But what is interesting to note here is the front of the mouse where the cable attaches is turned up to try and keep the mouse cable off the pad. In my opinion, because this cable is rubber, it's not doing that, but I'll explain that a little bit later on in this video. It's got 4 PTFE skates here, which are a bit of a weird shape and size, so they're going to be interesting to do on the force gauge glide test we're going to go through. It has a flared rear, and it has a logo on the rear that isn't RGB, it's just printed on in silver. When it's in my hand here, which is an 18cm by 9cm, you can see this mouse fits really well in my hand. One thing I have with this shape, although I do like it, is the right hand side flare does stick into my palm on the left hand side near where, just above where my little finger is, and it kind of irritates me, and kind of the shape doesn't work for my hand because of that reason. Would have been nice for me here to have a bit of a flatter side. It would have been nice to have some comfort grooves in the buttons here because of this texture. They are a little bit slippy, or I didn't have any issues with my fingers slipping off while firing. The sides here with the slope do help gripping the mouse, even though it's got this slippy coating on it. I didn't find it anywhere near as slippy as something like the G Pro Wireless, which was good to see. This one here is my girlfriend's hand, and this is a 16cm by 7.5cm hand, so a smaller hand here to give you a better idea of what it looks like when you don't have such big hands. The build quality, while this is an all-over plastic mouse, it's built out of a high-quality plastic. It is absolutely rock solid as well. There's no rattles, no creaks, no squeaks. I've got no issues whatsoever with the build quality of this mouse, and there's no flex in the sides for accidental clicks. So the sensor here is the PMW3389. We've tested this before in the DM1 FPS. It's supposed to be one of the top end sensors here. I personally prefer the 3360, but the 3389 is a good sensor, and we went through the sensor tests here. And one thing that I noticed on this mouse, but let me know in the comments what you think, is on the diagonals, it looked to me like it was trying to guess where I was going here. You can see some staircase effect. And for me, I'm not sure whether that's a firmware change here, because the DM1 FPS didn't seem to have this as much as this one has here. At 400 DPI, the sensor performs really well, and the shape feels really nice on this mouse. At 1600 DPI, I can't control it very well on a hard surface. I also found on a hard surface, which is a Razer Scarab here, that it was struggling to track reasonably well, especially on tight circles and things. For me, it seems a little bit more suited on a cloth surface 3389 sensor. So the Razer Scarab is dying. Let me know which mousepad you'd like me to use. I've got a good selection now. I still need to do some more Mousepad glide tests. Got things like the ROG Scarab, the Helios, as you can see, from Glorious. I've got a few other Mousepads, but this one would have to be a hard surface, so let me know which one you want me to use in these tests, and I'll do that going forward. On the slam test here, the mouse didn't spin out whatsoever, so no problems reported there. Good news. So I've gone on to 2 AimTests here. We've been using 3D AimTest for most of the time here. We know it's just recently changed, but I did run the test with this Xm1, and I got an average of 89,884 as an average across the 3 tests that I did, with the highest score being 90,735, which is quite a bit lower. The G-Wolf Skull scored 100,000, so this is quite a bit below that. I expected it to perform better because, I don't know, I kind of prefer ambidextrous shapes. Granted, the skull's using the 3360 sensor, but yeah, I was not sure if I like the shape. This is one of the issues I had with it digging into my side. I don't know. So a YouTuber that goes by the name of Arnworth B has asked me to also include Kovacs Aim Trainer. Now, I'm not familiar with this, so I'll give it a go on the tiles. And we're going to use this going forward as well. And I got a sum of 88 with this mouse and a final score of 77.4. To give us some kind of benchmark, I also ran it against my G Pro Wireless, which is my daily runner here, and I got a sum of 87 and a final score of 79.7. So slightly better with the G Pro Wireless. I've not used it before, so it'll be interesting to see if I actually get better with it, but now we have a good benchmark and we can start using that as well to give us even more information about aiming and how it suits my personal preference. I mean, this is all about me on the aim test really, and how I get on with the shape on the sensor. Alright, so let's get into what this mouse's USP is, and this is around the buttons. I'm going to start with the feeling first, and we're going to latency tests, sound tests, and then the force actuation test that we do. So we're going to do quite a bit on these. So the feeling on these, well, if you've noticed, the left and right mouse button are extremely low profile here to the shell. And this is, from my point of view, trying to give it a faster click here. So not only are they trying to increase the switch performance, also trying to increase the shell and optimizing it for clicks. What I did find here was sometimes I'm pretty sure I am getting misclicks where I'm trying to rapid fire and I'm missing it, or not necessarily missing it, but the click isn't returning back enough before I pushed it again, so I'm perhaps not triggering the switch enough. And that's because of the short actuation, in my opinion, on this shell. Now, it wasn't that common, but I did feel it definitely in a few of the games that I was playing and a few of the tests that I did. Microscopic bit of post-travel, like I said, this is probably one of the better ones for it. And there's a little bit of pre-travel, but again, it's very close here, but there is still some. There's no wiggle in the mouse button when it's pressed down, and the movement on these mouse buttons is really good. They are pretty much stable. Overall though, the press here, they're using the Omron 50 million click here, and we're used to those. They are a little bit mushy, but I don't mind them because I use them in G Pro Wireless as well as some other mice that I've used. And I'm quite like this switch, and these ones certainly feel nice to click. I would just like that little bit of extra actuation personally. One thing to note here as well is that because of the actuation here, they do feel quite light to press. So it's going to be interesting to see how they perform in the force gauge. So the other button here that's quite important is the scroll wheel. This has some medium to heavy tactile feedback, I would say. It's got quite a bit of force there. One thing to note though is how close they are, these notches on this. There's 24 if you wanted to know, and they are extremely close. And here I certainly wouldn't use them for weapon changing. I kept missing here, as you can see, and that was quite annoying. But for general surfing, again, it's a little bit too grippy for me, I think. Though it's a bit grippy, it does feel nice to scroll with. It feels nice and solid. There's no wiggle in it. I do like the rubber top on it though, and I do actually quite like the size of this scroll wheel. The force actuation, we'll see, it does feel a little bit heavy though. So the side buttons are, in my opinion, a little bit mushy. Are okay to press, but they could do some improvement here. They're a slightly different design to what we're normally seeing here on mice, so I'm looking forward to tearing it down here and seeing how these are put together. So the first test here, well, this is the human benchmark. Again, it's the clues in the name. There is some human element to this where you have to click it and it can cause a little bit more of latency. But I'm the one that's been doing all these mice, so we should get quite a common latency being me. And the Xm1 here came in really well at a latency of 174, which did surprise me. I thought we had a few more around that area and we don't. Most of them are around 176, which was good to see. So maybe there is something in this new patented analog technology maybe. So then we ran Blood PK, and the left mouse button average here over 5 came in at 154 milliseconds. Don't know, bit of left's quick, right's not so quick. I don't know whether there's a bit more travel in the PCB or something, or whether it's just the way they are. I've started to do the bump testing. I've introduced it into this video as well. I've tried to set up a little bit of a rig here so you can see it on the screen in real time against the mouse. And I've not used a piece of wood, but I've used a pen to bridge them together so you get an even click. Now, one thing to note here is I was playing around with it, and really it can depend where the switch is and where the button is to the switch on whether you can create additional latency or not. But trying to press here on the same position on the mouse button here, you can see that the Xm1 was faster than the G Pro Wireless on both left and right mouse buttons. So going forward, I'm going to use the Xm1 as the fastest mouse at the minute. I'm going to compare it to all the other mice and see which one becomes champion in this test. So I've been chatting to a few of you on Reddit around how we can do some better latency tests here. And I'm looking to get a 1000 FPS camera. Don't know which one to get. Don't know if to spend too much money or not. Don't know if it's going to be worth doing or not. So let me know in the comments if you fancy that. Hit the like button if you do, and I'll certainly understand that that's probably going to be a wise investment in a camera, and we can definitely test a lot more stuff on the mice here, like movement latency, button latency, which I think is probably the next level to these benchmarks. So another new test that I've added here is something called clicks per second. It's using a website that I've found. Not sure if it's any good, but at least it's a good start here. If there's a better option, let me know again. There's a lot of let me know in this video, so get commenting. That's because I want to give you content that you like here, hopefully. So this click per second test here was an interesting one. I'm expecting this low profile Xm1 here to outperform my G Pro Wireless, and it didn't here. The Xm1 came with an average click performance of 5.7 clicks per second. My G Pro Wireless came in with 5.9 per second. So if you looked at that and saw the latency difference in the bump test, as well as human benchmark, and you see the low profile of the Xm1, I would have backed the Xm1 here to have outperformed the G Pro Wireless by maybe a click extra per second, but it doesn't. I was surprised that the G Pro Wireless was quicker. So I think it's worth chatting a little bit more about this paint tinting analog technology here, because this is its USP, and I think you've certainly seen in these tests some improvements here on the response time. It's a bit weird on the left and right mouse buttons, and I don't know if it's a big enough difference for me to go out and buy this just purely for this new switch technology, given that, to be fair, the G Pro Wireless was a little bit quicker, if not on par with it, let's say. So it wasn't a big improvement here that I would have expected. So let's get the force gauge meter out and see what the pressure is, or the actuation force is required to press these buttons down. So as you know, we take 3 tests here per position on the button, front, back and mid. And I'm just going to read out the average here, so you don't have to go through all these because they are quite long. So the left mouse button front average force to press it was 38 grams. The middle was 97 grams and the rear was 172 grams. The right was 39 grams. The middle was 82 grams and the right was 183 grams. So when we take a look at this in the most detailed chart here for the left and right mouse button, you can see on the front here, as you move back for the mouse, it quite dramatically increases in force that you need. And this is because it's so tight to the shell on the switch. And overall, it gives it an average, really, that's a little bit higher, 102 on the left and 101 on the right. Now, so what that means is just in front of the scroll wheel, you're going to have to be to get a really light actuation. Next to the scroll wheel, it's going to start to be pretty tough and probably a little bit tighter than most mice you've probably used. And behind that, it's really, really tight, which is probably why I was finding the G Pro Wireless outperformed it when I was doing the clicks per second, because I wasn't fully at the front of the button. So the side buttons here, the average on the front came in at 63 grams and the rear is 82 grams. So the side button results, while the average here is 63 grams for the front and the rear is 82 grams. That means that the front one is certainly in the lighter range of what we've had here on the side buttons to press. And the rear one is in the mid to hard press kind of range. Overall, they're not particularly the worst buttons I've had, and they're not the best buttons. So the scroll wheel here comes in at an average of 240 grams to press. That's certainly, looking at these charts, in the higher end here. Bear in mind though, I use a G Pro Wireless, which requires even more force. I didn't particularly find this to be an issue for me when I was gaming with it. So let's hear what these sound like. So moving on here now, we get onto the weight range, and this is probably one of the ones where the vendors don't necessarily tell the truth. They don't tell you whether they're weighing it with the cable or not. So here they say this weighs 70 grams. We put it on the scales here and it comes in at 72 grams. Now, in fairness, that's probably with a bit of cable. So it's 72 grams with a bit of cable and it's 70 grams with no cable, let's say. But again, in the teardown, when we pull it to pieces, I'll weigh it without the cable and we'll get a representation if that's true or not. If you're interested in how heavy it's going to be in your backpack here, or you just want to see in general as I do, how heavy it is overall in weight, it's 112 grams. So the skates here, well, I've got a little bit of a skate fetish at the minute, and I'm looking to see how these perform. I'm quite intrigued by the style and the shape of these. They don't have rounded edges. Manufacturers really now should be putting rounded edges, because I agree with what some people have said. Now I've done a lot more testing, and that the sharper edges tend to snag on cloth pads, or they can do, and it is worthwhile probably as default rounding these off. I don't know why they don't do it. So if you're not familiar how we take the measurements here across the pad, we take 4 measurements. We take an NSW, which is a normal rotated pad, sideways. We take an NFW, which is normal forwards. We then rotate the pad, and we take an RSW measurement, which is rotated sideways, and we take an RFW, which is rotated forwards. Now, when the pad's in its normal rotation, the 2 measurements that you want to focus on, and we do that in the averages here on these charts that I'll show you, is you want to look at the NFW and the RSW, so normal forward and rotated sideways. So the NSW here came in an average of 23 grams. The NFW came in an average of 33 grams. The RSW came in an average of 27 grams. And the RFW came in an average of 30 grams. So we drop that in the charts here, and you can see that this one on its stock feet here is probably mid-table here with the skates. Now, personally, I thought these were going to perform slightly better and be more like the Skull or the Model O and be quite smooth, because they do feel that way. But I don't know if that's to do with the shape or not, but here you can see that that wasn't the case. If we can get some aftermarket skates for this, let me know. I'll pick some up. I haven't seen any yet, and we'll see if that makes a difference to these, because I think this is a good one to test these out on to see if you can get some improvement here, because you could probably do a slightly faster glide. So let's get into the dimensions here. Well, this came in at a length of 122 millimeters. The rear is 66 millimeters wide. The middle top is 60 millimeters wide. We've got the middle, but this is where the profile of the buttons is. I've included this now as part of this test, and it comes in at 63 millimeters. The bottom comes in at 55 millimeters in the middle, and the front comes in at 61 millimeters. The height on the rear is 35 millimeters. The height on the middle is 38 millimeters at the highest point, and the front is 19 millimeters, which suggests, as we know, that this is the lowest profile front here. So the profile on the front here is certainly low at 19 millimeters, and the glorious Model O was the lowest we've had, which was 21 millimeters, along with the G305. So the front left and right buttons here measuring at 28 millimeters. The scroll wheel thickness comes in at 6.6 millimeters, which is on par with the G Pro Wireless. The overall length of the scroll wheel is small. It comes in at 20 millimeters. I was thinking about adding some charts here for the dimensions. Let me know what you think in the comments. I was thinking about doing things for like length, so you could see them compared to other mice, or you can see the height dimensions or the width dimensions compared to other mice as well. I don't know if that's going to be useful, because it's hard to see it visually when it's written in numbers. It's more about the shape and the picture, and that's why I've done those pictures. So perhaps worth checking those out. The next bit's the cable, and this is why I think they could certainly make an improvement here. It would have been nice for them to follow the trend where people have been using shoelaces, or things like the Skull here saying they're using a power cord. And they've used a rubber cable here. For me, it's got reasonable flex, but it certainly lacks some flex here. You can see it catches on the mat, which was really annoying when I was gaming. For me, I would get a bungee for this. And for me, it's probably a little bit less flexible than a Zowie cable. Now it comes in at 1.8 meters. They've picked the front up, like we said here, with the attachment to the mouse, but because the cable's so heavy, it just lies flat on the mouse pad. So yes, it doesn't drag directly at the front of the mouse here, which is a benefit, but it drags pretty close, just a little bit further down. They should have put a shoelace on it. That would have made it good. Software, one of my pet hates, as you all know, is when people don't provide software with mice, and they do provide software here with the mouse, which was good to see. Plus point for that. Not so good is the amount of features in it, because they are pretty restricted. So let's go through a few of them here. Well, one of the first things that I could not work out is how you reassign mouse buttons for different key functions, and you can't reassign the front and left mouse button, or not in the version I had. And on the side buttons, you can only define preset buttons like Internet Explorer. Say what? What was nice to see was you can adjust the lift-off distance from a default of 2 millimeters to 3 millimeters. Congrats for that. That's a good one. It was nice to see you could increase the DPI increments at 50s, not 100s. That was definitely a plus, because a lot of them seem to be doing 100s. So that was nice to see there. Give a bit more control over your DPI settings. So it's good to see you could change the DPI color, so you know which profile you're on when you're running it. That's great. You flip the mouse over, it shows you, and you can instantly tell. Skull last week didn't have that, which annoyed me, so it's good to see that in this one. You can't change the polling rate, it's fixed at 1000 Hz, which doesn't bother me because that's what I use anyway, but if you want to reduce it, you certainly can't do that in the software. There's an option for a ripple control. I have no idea what that does. I turned it on, I turned it off, I tried some stuff out and I couldn't really understand what changes it was making, so maybe that's just me being a bit thick. It's something that I've not seen before, so I don't know, let me know. The thing here is, joking aside, they have given some software. It certainly needs a lot of features added to it. It's a little bit limited, so I hope they add those in the updates here. I certainly would recommend it because that allows you to change things like the mappings of the mouse buttons. Without that, for me, once you've set the DPI, I'm just gonna have to install something else like Xmouse software so I can customize the buttons. I want to use it for primary, secondary, I want to use it for grenades, and I can't do that easily. So at the end of the review here, this has been a little bit of a long one, but the overall conclusion here really is that this is a good mouse. I do like the shape of it. It doesn't really work for me on the flared right hand side. That's something to bear in mind if you're a bit sensitive to that as well. The buttons were certainly slightly quicker, although I don't like the profile of these buttons. They're a little bit low for me and I would have liked a comfort curve in them. The cable on it is certainly not good compared to what's coming out at the minute. This is certainly a letdown for it, but you can change that easily with the power cord. USP for this was the mouse latency, and you certainly saw some improvements in latency, but in reality I don't think I saw anything. In fact, I probably saw a slight decrease in my click rate as we saw the G Pro wireless, because I'm not used to it, or the low profile, I say, was causing me some problems. So overall, it's a nice mouse. I do like the shape. It's quite flat on the top here, and it would be nice to have a better coating because it's a little bit of a fingerprint magnet. So if you're a bit precious about your setup here, you better get some cloths out because you have to clean this regularly, probably every time you pick it up. And yeah, wait until the next one. We're going to get some modifications going out. We're going to do the G305 next. The G502 is rocketing on the voting system, so I'm going to have to do that next because you're probably going to kill me if I don't. And then we're probably going to go on to the S2 from Zari, which was ahead of it, but obviously that voting system is about the priority, and that's what's coming up next. And we're also going to do the Razer Viper review as well as some other stuff. I need to get some Mousepad reviews out. I've got some cool custom ones coming that someone sent me off Reddit. That's going to be going on very shortly. I'll be doing a video on those just to show what they look like. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Catch you later. Bye bye.